Okay, so I haven't done one of these in quite a while, and I've been thinking about things I wanted to do. And one of the things that's a sticking point for a lot of people in Maya is setting channels on multiple objects. You go to the attribute editor, and you're like, wait a minute, if I go in here and set this, why is it only doing it for one object? Things like that. So I just wanted to go over a few things and show you some really simple tricks that I think are helpful. So one of those obvious ones is, if it's in the channel box, this is called keyable, and that's what that basically means. It just makes it show up in the channel box, and you can key it when you hit S. But that makes it an easy way to access all your attributes. And a trick you've probably seen is if you select all your objects and then select like the last object, and you go in here and just hit Tab, and you go through your, it's going to set the channels for every object based on that last selected object. And basically the reason it's doing that is it's just saying, oh, it's like an enter, right? So you're just resetting the information based on that second object, right? So 111, there we go, that sort of thing. You'll see people use this a lot. It's just a helpful thing. Another thing you've probably seen is that if you go to the second part of your channel box here, you have a couple different options. If you have nodes that have the exact same channels, you can set that for all those objects. So in this particular instance, I selected these locators in the exact same order each time for these objects down here to make parent constraints. And so now what I can do is if I select all these objects, even though I'm only showing the parent constraint 1, if I go in here and shut all these off, it's only going to do it it's going to do it for all the objects I have selected. So if I go in here again, I'm going to set these all to 0, let's say, and maybe locator 4, set that weight to 1, 3, 4, that's this one. Now it's going to move all of them and set them, right? That's great for objects that all have the same channels, right? Otherwise, it's not going to really work. One of the things I was just talking about recently, too, is, that's off. Maybe I can do cylinder. This is really helpful for things like the the nonlinears. And so if I grab each of these guys and make a nonlinear bend on them, let's see if I have them all. Cool. Yeah, I'm gonna select all these guys. I have isolate turned on, that's why. It's weird. Select all these guys and I jump down to the bend. I'm actually grabbing all of them, which is kind of nice. So depending on what you're doing, you can do that. That's only if all the channels match each other. If they don't have the same channels, that's not going to work. So say I select this, let's get rid of these bend handles, and instead let's grab this guy here, nonlinear again. I'll put a bend on this one, a flare on this one, a sine on this one, squash on this one, and a twist on this one, right? So now if I select all those objects, and I click down to twist, it's only going to affect the one that has something called start angle. Of course, they all have low bound and high bound. So if I select each one individually, take the bend and curve it, we'll take the flare and flare it, we'll take, the sine wave and sine it, squash and squash it with its factor, right? The twist and change the starting angle. But if I select all these guys and say I go down to, even though I'm only selecting twist, it's going to select all of them. So if I do the high bound, you notice it changes the high bound for every one of those deformers. Maybe that's a thing you want, maybe it's not. It's just something to be good to be aware of when you go down here in the channel box and select these guys. All right, let's hide that, or just delete it. Cool. And I'll delete that. Cool. Now, the other thing I want to look at was if you go to the attribute editor here, and there's channels that, the attribute editor is a little bit confusing for people. Unlike the channel box, which acts on every single object you have selected, the attribute editor only works on whatever tab you have selected. So in this case, I have the p-cone shape 2, or if I go up, I have the p-cone 2 transform selected. And you think if I say enable overrides and set this to say template, it would template all of them. But it does not. And that's because in the attribute editor's mind, I'm only working on the objects that I have selected in those tabs. So realistically, it'd be nice if it worked. It's a 6-to-1, half dozen the other. Sometimes I like it this way, sometimes I don't. But you get over it quickly, right? So what I'm going to do is just talk about a quick way to do what I call metal stealing. and use some script to get exactly what you want. It's code that you can reuse on everything. And I'm not even going to say it's a scripting tip. It's literally just a grab this code and use it. It doesn't even need, you don't need to know anything about scripting at all. So again, I'm going to go probably talk more than what you need, but literally all you need to do is just steal this script. And I am going to do it in Mel. And the reason I'm doing it in Mel is because every time you do something in Maya, it's going to print back that information. There you go, right? And I could say, you know what, set this to template. Okay, cool. Set it to reference. Okay, cool. So this information, this is written in Mel already. Unlike Python in Maya, I would have to then convert this to a Python code base. In this case, I don't. And that's kind of why Mel is nice for people who don't do any scripting whatsoever and don't want to do any scripting. Honestly, it has its bugs and things like that. It doesn't work great for a lot of things, and Python's better. But for people, like I learned Mel and did a ton in Mel before I used Python, before it was even in Maya. And now I'm starting to get rusty with Mel, but it's still super handy, and sometimes it's just easier, especially if you don't know anything about scripting. But I will give you some caveats and just say, always do this, always do that. Hopefully that'll be helpful. All right, so what I'm going to do, anytime I'm running any Mel in the script editor, I always want to make sure I have an open curly brace and a closed curly brace. Now the reason for that is so that I don't make my variables global. Now you don't really need to know what that means other than when I make a variable, it's only going to be within this, what we call scope. It's only going to be scoped within these two braces. So if I say like string to create a string variable, and a variable is just a container, right? Foo, right? Something like that, right? I'm going to run this, and if I go down here and say print $foo, it's going to say I don't know what foo is. But if I take that and put it up here in the scope area and run it, it's going to print what it is. So that's what I mean by scoping. And the reason I do that in the script editor is so that these things don't become global, so that it messes up other scripts, or that if I write scripts that way, I just get used to the habit, and that way they stay within, they're not going to mess up other things. If I start making variables all over the place that are global, I can run into issues later on. It also makes it easier later if we want to turn it into a full-blown procedure. So in this case, what I'm going to do is use some Mel code, and the code I'm using is list, or ls. And you notice I'm putting these little backticks in here. Now, these are the ones in the upper left corner where your tilde is. So your tilde is this key. So it's just that little tick key. It's not the one over by your enter key. So it's the upper left part of your keyboard. And that basically is just a Mel code. And again, you don't even need to know what this is. I've given you 10 times more information you already need. You literally just need to steal this. So string, set a variable called string. I do need to make it an array. Now, the only thing you need to know about array is it's multiple objects in a variable versus a single object in a variable. Okay, again, you don't even need to know that. Okay, so string, what do I have selected? So what that's going to do is take whatever I have selected and, oops, I forgot to, right now I got to find that guy. There we go, turn that off. Cool. Basically, take whatever I have selected and put it into a box. And just what it does. Okay, so now the thing you want to steal is this thing called for loop. So let's say for $each in $foo. Actually, I should change this to select or SEL. And these are variables. They can be named anything you want, right? I'm going to go in here and again put those curly braces. And if I hit enter, it automatically puts that second closed curly brace there for me. Now, what this is saying is for every object, oops, don't do that. For every object that's in my selection set, grab from here, this is or an array, let's do something to it. So that's what I'm going to do. Now, Maya doesn't care about white space, or sorry, Mel doesn't care about white space. So this could look horrible, it'll still work. Python's going to care about white space and tabbing and spacing. So another reason that I show people Mel is that it's so, you could just steal it and most of the time it'll work, and even if you get your spaces wrong, it still works. It is good to get in the habit of good code formatting. However, in this case, it really doesn't matter. So I'm going to say there's a command called setAttr, and if I hit Control spacebar, I have to have this turned on. You can get the it'll autofill and give you all the information. But what I'm going to do is just go in here and write it, and you literally can just steal it. So I'm going to use that each, and I'm going to do a concatenation of my channels, and I'm going to look at this code I have right here and just steal this code, drop that there, and I'm just going to replace this p helix 2 with $ each. Whoops, if I can spell. Wow, I'm doing terrible. And end, brace it, and put a 1 on there. So basically what that's just saying is set each of these objects, the overrideEnabled, to 1, which will turn them on, right? And then what I want to do is, what's it called? Let's do reference. Okay, display override type is called that. And that's why I use Mel in this case, because it's so easy. I can just steal it right from there. I don't even know, you need to know how to code it. It's already doing it for me. Again, I'll just take this, replace that with each, make sure I have a $ on it, because in Mel it's a variable, has to have it. Again, you don't need to know this, just steal it. Okay, so now what should happen is if I select all these guys, and my comb, and I run this, oh, I get a syntax error. What did I do? Oh, I forgot to put an end parentheses other. A lot of times I'll tell you what that is. Again, once I get this code sussed, you can steal it. So I'll grab all that, boom, set that, and now you'll notice for every object in here, I've set them to reference. You see it has a black wireframe, meaning it's referenced. So I can write another script just by stealing this and turn that off, right? So now if I grab all this, run it on each of those objects, now I've turned it off. Now obviously there's ways to do this in Maya already, but there's a lot of times you come across a code where you're like, God, I wish there was just a simple way to do this in the attribute or in the channel box without making things keyable, and this is how I do that with just a very simple mel for each loop. And you can just steal this. I'll put the code in below, and you can just take it. And I'll just throw it on my shelf. Maybe give it a name. Ref on. I don't care. And maybe give it an icon later or something like that. So what is going to come into very handy is things like shaders. So I'll clear this and grab all my shaders here. And let's say I wanted to change the transparency of all these shaders. Well, if I go in here and change this slider, you notice it's only doing it for that one particular shader. Again, the attribute editor doesn't care about all the other tabs you have selected. It only cares about what's in that selected tab. So this is a case where I can grab that. Again, I can take this exact same code, and I'm just going to replace what the the last part of this script is. So if I go in here and just move this to say there, it gives me the command that I want. Again, spacing doesn't matter, I'm just doing them out of habit. And I can just change orange shader to each plus. Make sure I put an end paren on it. Take this out. And now I have a simple script that will change the transparency of all my objects that I have selected. So again, I'm going to go in there, select all my shaders, and even though it's only showing the what did I do? Oh, I have something selected that doesn't actually have, I selected something else. So let's open up this again. I'm going to grab those shaders only, and I'll run this, and it should set the transparency on those. What did I do? Oh, I dropped the selection. That's weird. Okay. You know what? We should make it higher. So let's do like 0.8. Nothing selected, nothing happens. Select these guys and set all the transparencies at the same time, which is nice, right? If I do it in an attributor, I only get one. Ooh, come here. Cool. And if I do it with my script, I can actually set all of them. So let's set it to 0, 0, 0. Now we set it back to normal. Now you notice it gives me it's throwing an error saying this polycylinder does not have an attribute named transparency, and that's because I still have that selected. So if I drop that selection and grab it, when you're making super simple code like this, that's fine. Errors are fine. They're bound to happen. I actually like keeping those errors in there so I know what it did wrong because I'm not putting any serious error checking into this script. Again, all you need to do is steal this exact same code, do something, let's say ambient color. Cool. There's the code. Grab it to the dot. Go in here, put that up to the dot. Oh, make sure that dot is still in there. Grab my shaders. Syntax error. Oh, again, I forgot the parentheses. All right, cool. That's the other thing in Mel, just in case you do hit that, you always need the semicolon at the end. This is supposed to be a simple script. There we go. Cool. And I want to set back to 0. Oh, I forgot the third 0. And we'll set it back to normal. Cool. I hope that makes sense. And again, you don't need to know anything about what I did. You can just literally steal that code. Now, if you are worried about having other objects selected and it killing your code, like say I have the objects and the shader selected, and I run this and I throw those errors, there's a simple way to work around that as well. I don't always do this because I like to have those errors to make sure when I'm just using null snippets like this that aren't real procedures, I'll throw this in there. So, but you can use what's called a catch. And so what a catch is going to do, oh, what have I done? There we go. And what a catch is going to do is I can go in here, and again, it's that back tick mark, and it'll run what's in here, but it'll catch it, and so it catches that error and lets you keep going. So even though I have these guys selected that don't have anything called ambient color in them, I should change it to transparency again. And do like 0.5. 0.55 there. Cool. So if I have these guys selected and I have the shader selected, what's going to do is run through there, and if it can't do it, it says, oh well, throw an error and keep going. So it'll still do it on all the objects that do have transparency, but it'll give you an error on all the objects that don't. It's a little bit dangerous in that, you want to make sure you know what you're getting, but yeah. Again, steal it, do whatever you want with it, keep it forever. It's just, you don't even have to know what that is. You literally can just do something and then steal that code, right? Even when it gets complicated, you can still just do it. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is show you how this works with something like a blend shape, and that's where it gets kind of cool. So when I create a blend shape, give me a sphere, and let's just make some simple blend shape for this guy, right? And I just have a thing called quick blend, so I can just quickly make these guys. Now move that over, right? Okay. So if I go in here and select both of these, and again I go down to that blend shape, I can do envelope, right? Because they both have the envelope attribute, and that works just fine. But if I go below that, turn it back on. If I go below that and I grab the actual channel, it's only going to do it on the one that I last selected. And the reason for that is that it's looking at the exact name of that channel. When you make blend shapes, it's based on the target. So if I select this object, go to my blend shape, you see it's called pcube2. This is called pcube2, that's where that came from. If I grab this object and look at its blend shape, it's called psphere2, because it's based on that object there. And so when I select this, I'm only telling it that exact name to use. Now what's interesting about blend shapes is these are actually aliased channels. And what that means is it's not the true name of the channel that you see in the channel box. So the thing about blend shapes is that these are actually aliased channels, which means it's not the true name of the channel. It's been aliased with the name of that target so that you can make it easier to work with. So the real name of that channel is actually a multiple channel just called W. So what you can actually do is if I go in here and I'll leave the catch on, but I'll change this to W first in the array. You don't need to know what that means. Again, you can just steal this. And what I can do is go down here and grab those blend shapes, deselect my objects. I can just show you that I do have them selected, those two blend shapes. If you don't know that trick, you just select the objects. If you select the inputs, now this is going to work on inputs. It's not going to work on things like constraints and stuff like that. But if I go in here and select inputs and then Control deselect my objects, I'll be left with those blend shapes selected. And now if I run this, you notice it changes both of them at the same time, which is pretty cool because it's looking at the true name of that channel, which is actually w.w, and then which number of the, like I said, it's a multiple. So a little bit more than I wanted to get into, but it basically just means it's the first of those channels. So if I open this, whoops, I didn't have them selected. There we go, select them. There we go. So if I add an object to this, let's do this, create another cube, go and move it over here and do something weird with it, and add that to my blend shape. Okay, turn that back on. Whoops, did I not add it? I didn't add it. There we go, cool. So now I have a secondary blend shape in there, right? So I can turn them both on, and if I run these guys and run that as I set it to 0, oops, again, I need to make sure I have the blend shape selected. Oh, that's actually interesting, because I have it as a catch. It'll still work, which is pretty cool. But you notice that it left that second attribute alone, which is actually weight 1. Not to be confused with the value that it has right now. So let me show you how that works. So if I change this to weight 1 and set it to 1, and I select those guys, it's still going to set that value. This blend shape in particular does not have a secondary weight. Why did it put that there? Oh, interesting. It set it and it created it and set it. Oh, all right, don't do that. But the idea is that it does set that secondary value for you. And then I also wanted to show you how there's a cool little trick in the attribute editor. It's not really a trick, but it's something you can do if you want to replace all your channels and save them with these presets. So you're probably familiar with, if you've used nCloth at all, you're probably familiar with the presets that are in here. I grabbed this guy and just said, let's make him into a water balloon. And this one I actually did some testing on and got some values that I like. So I hit play on that. Okay, so a couple things I can do, which is kind of cool, is I can actually grab this and get to my nCloth and save that preset out. I've already actually saved it, but I'll show you how that works. I can say save nCloth preset. I'll call it dolphin. Boy, I can spell it. And now I select this other object and go to presets, and now I have something down here called dolphin in my presets. I can replace it. And so now if I run this, it's going to have the same setting as the dolphin, which is pretty cool. Now that's not just something you can use on specialty items like nCloth. You can use it on anything. So if I go in here and create a cube, and I was like doing this. Cool. And let's kill its history. All right, cool. Take that, move it over here, create another one, move it over here, take another one, over here. And you can use the shaders, you can do it with any objects, right? So I have a bunch of my objects created. And when I select this, what I can do is, you can't do it for shapes for some reason, but if I go into the P cube here, I'm actually in the transform node of this object. If I show shapes, every object, there's a shape node and an object node, or meshes, polygons, things like that. So I'm actually doing this to the upper level node, and I can do a preset on that and say, save transform preset. So this is kind of a nice way to save poses and things like that. That's already built into Maya. So I can just say, demo place, save that attribute, select this object, say presets, demo place, replace. It's going to pop it over there. Now, I had some issues with this a second ago, but let's see if this works. Select all these guys, say preset, demo place, replace all selected. It should move all of them. For some reason, it's not. I wonder if that's broken. All right. But anyway, you can make anything into a saved preset or pose and just reuse it later on. So you can, and that'll be persistent from file to file. You can just grab those things. Okay. So main takeaway here is, you have your tabbing through values, right? You have this very simple script that you can steal. And honestly, you can steal this exact same code and just replace the last half of it. Just make sure you put that paren in there. And then the other thing is you have your presets, and you can save out things that way. Probably the safest bet is to do using this simple for each loop. All right, so I hope that's been helpful. If you have any questions about what I've done, or you want to explain more about what's going on, or if you have a question about anything else, I'm always looking for stuff to do simple tutorials on. Usually I do is I grab things that hit me every day. This is something that, this little command here I write probably 2 or 3 times a day as I'm working. I don't even copy paste because I'm so used to writing it. I'll just write it over and over and over again. Of course, now I do it with Python and Maya, but if you've done no programming whatsoever, and you don't even care about programming, I think the Mel way is a nicer way, only because when you do things, they show up right in your script editor, and you can just literally steal them, copy paste, and just change out a few things and get exactly what you want. All right, so I hope that's been helpful, and I'll see you later.